David, welcome to the Men Made for More podcast. I'm really excited to have you on here, man. I'm glad we got connected, and thanks for taking some time out to come on today.
Oh, thank you for having me, bro. I totally, just totally respect you and what you do, and I'm appreciative, having me on here. So, thank you.
Yeah, really excited to hear your message today. I know we got a lot of good stuff. We already started going down some good rabbit holes before we hit record, so we decided to get this thing running. But before we do, why don't you give people just a background of your story, personally, professionally, and where you're at today?
I'm 42 years old. Um, I'm a father of three children. I have a 14-year-old daughter, a 7-year-old boy, and then a 5-year-old boy. Um, I'm a journeyman lineman by trade, so I travel around restoring power, where places like that are hit by a hurricane or ravaged by storms and stuff like that. Um, and what sparked me to speak out about this is in 2018 we had a tragic accident that had happened while I was on the road. I'd been on the road for 3 years working in El Paso, Texas as a foreman out there. And my wife, she had contracted a chronic disease. She got Lyme disease. She was training for a marathon and she got bit by a tick. And it just really started to deteriorate her health to the point where she couldn't even get out of bed. During that time, we didn't know what was going on at all with her. We just knew that she needed me to come home. I came home for Christmas break, December 19th, and Christmas Day, her heart stopped. She went to the emergency room and her heart stopped. Um, at that time, I still didn't know. They couldn't figure out what was going on with her. So they just kept doing tests and running tests and running tests. And I was forced to be home. I had lost my job because obviously I couldn't go back to work. I was scheduled to go back to work January 3rd. And I called my boss. I told him, I was like, dude, I don't know what's going on with my wife. She's not doing well. Her heart stopped and they're doing tests and I don't know when I'm going to come back. So him doing the right thing, he's like, dude, I can't keep you on, you're a contractor. So he laid me off, and I totally understand that he had to do that, so there's no hard feelings there. But it was actually a blessing because at that time I was at home and I was caring for her and helping her get out of bed and just helping her get through this hard time. I started to see where I had missed the mark in my life. I'd started to see where I had, in the process of trying to create success in my family and provide for them, I had lost significance in my home. You know, I once heard it from John Maxwell, him saying that in order for you to have influence, you need to spend time. You know what I mean? And an influencer is a leader. So as fathers at the house, our position is being a leader. Okay. A leader is having influence. So all that time I was gone, I wasn't getting that influence needed in my children. I wasn't being the leader at all for them. And I saw that and it hurt me, it hurt me deeply to see that I had become estranged chasing after success with them. So I totally changed that around. I started doing the steps, through God, of course, leading me and guiding me and showing me which direction I needed to go for my family to become that father figure back in their lives, to become that leader again. And that's where my journey has taken me. I've been able to speak to countless people, other fathers and stuff like that in this journey, just to be able to trade insights. The Bible says iron sharpens iron. So just to be able to talk with them, to share ideas about being a better father, to get their insight and stuff like that. And that's where I'm at today.
I think it's so cool the mission you're on, and it's such an overlooked thing too. Of we were talking a little bit before of sometimes we could think we're doing a better job than we're doing too. As the fathers out there, you might not notice that there's any problems, or you might just kind of push those things under the rug. What were some things with your kids that you started to notice when you say you noticed you were losing influence on them, or you were noticing those things? What kind of things did you notice in your kids in your home?
I started to notice they're nervous around me. I got the feeling that they were walking on eggshells. And that's not something that a father should produce in their children. That's anxiety and that's fear. And I didn't like that. It literally broke my heart when I saw that. And I just started to see that they didn't want to spend time with me. You know what I mean? They were tolerating me instead of celebrating that I was home. You know what I mean? And that was a big deal for me. I mean, you know, they had gone to a point where they were already used to me leaving. So when I didn't leave back on the road, they didn't know what to do with me. You know what I mean? And it was almost like we were living together, but they're walking on eggshells. And it was crazy, you know. My daughter started to rebel with me. You know what I mean? My middle son is the one I saw a big change. He stopped talking to me. You know, and he was let's see, so that was in 2018. He's 7 now, so he was 5 at the time, and he stopped talking to me. He didn't really want to talk to me. He didn't want anything really to do with me because he was already set up to protect himself. He was already set up because he didn't want to engage with me because he knew I was going to leave again. So it was easier for him to just stay away from me. And I recognized that because that's what I did. Anytime I was going to leave, the way I protected myself, because deep down inside, I knew I was wrong, you know, what I started doing was getting busy and delving into chores and stuff like that. So I was super, super busy at the house and trying to catch up on all these things that I needed to do instead of spending the quality time I needed to do with the children. And what it was is a self-defense mechanism that I had created. That way I can remain detached from them. So the hurt wouldn't be so magnified when I did leave. And all this stuff was just a realization what I was doing. You know what I mean? And I was just totally blown away.
And I'm sure, correct me if I'm wrong, you're probably easily able to justify some of those things as like, well, these chores have to get done, and this and this has to get done. To almost we get in this self-talk, and whether it's chores, it can be anything. Sometimes worse things, better things, but the distraction, the justification of like, yeah, this okay though. This just has to get done. What was how hard was it to actually confront that, or what was that turning point where you actually had to face this head on and have that realization?
Well, with the chores and stuff like that, we have a small farm. Okay. I never wanted to live in the city or nothing like that. So there was stuff that was needing to be taken care of. But when I started spending more and more time out there, and it was almost like to get away, you know what I mean? And I believe part of the reason behind that was because I wasn't used to being with a family. You're by yourself, you're on the road, you're in a trailer, you're in a hotel, whatever it is, you know what I mean? And I wasn't used to having dad, all the time, 24/7 in your face. So that was like my escape to get away from them and to get away from my family. And once I started seeing that, I started having to really make the positive changes, which were to realize that, man, you do have a family. Stop being a butthead. You know what I mean? You have a family. Start spending that time. Start tossing the football with your son. And at first my son didn't want to play with me. And that's heartbreaking when you're trying your best and the kids don't want nothing to do with you. I mean, that to me, I never want to go back there again.
But it takes some persistence, I would guess, too. And it's not like all of a sudden they're gonna, forget everything and one time trying to throw the football around that it's going to correct those wrongs. Was this over months or years, or how long did it take to start to get that trust back?
It's taken 2 years now. It's taken 2 years. I've been home, and it's still not the greatest, but it's not where it was. So now I make it a point to where if my kid comes up to me and shares something with me, any one of them, I have to stop intentionally what I'm doing to show them that you're important. You're more important than this. Because before I didn't do that. And it takes that, because see, your kids will watch you. You can tell them all day long you love them, but they watch what you do. You're a leader, so you have influence, so they're going to watch you. So when you're telling them I love you and all this stuff, they don't care about that. That's in one ear and out the other. What they want to do is see if you're changing, if you're consistent is the word I'm looking for. So I have to show consistency in everything I do. If I tell them it's important to work out, I got to show them that it's important to work out by being consistent in that. If I got to tell them, stay off your device, like my daughter called me out the other day. I told her, you're too much on your device. You need to settle down with that thing. Right away, a smart 14-year-old, you know what I mean? She hits me up right away and she's like, well, Dad, you're always on yours. And that was conviction right there. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. We're going to set apart a time to where we shouldn't have no devices at the table or anything like that. Because I grew up in a time where we sat at the table when we're eating and we didn't have devices or anything like that. I didn't have those cell phones. You know what I mean? We didn't have that stuff. So now that they're more adamant and everybody has one right now, you know what I mean? They're easy to get addicted to. It's like an addiction, you know what I mean? And I got to be real adamant about that too, man. It's crazy. We thought as children that our parents had it hard raising us. I think today more than ever, it's harder now to raise a child. Things were more simpler back then. Yeah. I mean, there was, stuff that was harder, I guess, but as far as simplicity and as far as technology goes, it's more rapid. It's right there. And then, you know what I mean? So we got to be really double on our guard for that, I believe. So,
yeah, it is tough right now. Cause even, and I feel for all the kids out there and the teens and those people that are dealing with social media and those things that, I didn't have to grow up with those in at least my impactful years. They came later on into college and stuff, but for such a developmental time there too, it's not the, oh, no one likes me at school or I'm having a hard time having friends. It's like, literally, I don't have friends or I have only this many likes. There's almost just like fast objective feedback in this, it can be a cruel place too, but I think having those boundaries in place is big, and sounds like it starts from you and being able to demonstrate that example that it's okay to have the phone away and make other substitutions in place of that.
Absolutely. And to be quite honest, social media and all that stuff and all these devices make a excuse my language, but a crappy parent. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of parents do these days is they're so busy entwined on tweeting or whatever it is, or whatever they have to do. I'm guilty of it myself, that we give them those devices to kind of babysit them. You know what I mean? And when we do that, I mean, a lot of times I don't think a lot of parents even know what their kids are watching, or getting into, so it's a very, very tricky world right now, especially with everything that's going on, and yeah. You just gotta be on the watch always. I mean, head on a swivel, you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
We have a term that we use when I was, doing line work, and that term is keep clipped in, and the meaning behind that is when you're clipped in, you're always paying attention because you don't know what can hurt you. I mean, we deal with heights, with extremes, to heavy loads, to being in the bike, to not only that, electricity, to helicopters, whatever. I mean, it's a dangerous job. So you always got to have your head on the swivel. You always got to be clipped in, and you got to know what your surroundings are. One of the major things I learned from a very good lineman, a friend of mine that I looked up to as a line daddy, was when you show up, always do a quick survey of what can hurt you and have a way out. And I try to implement that into my life as well, even with the children and stuff like that. What can harm you? You know what I mean? And just try to, that always plays in the back of my head. You know what I mean? What can harm you? What can harm your children? You know what I mean? And I think that helps out a lot. You know what I mean?
I like that a lot. And that's because the environment controls such a big piece of how kids, or how even as adults, how we're growing or progressing, or if we're not progressing, how we're regressing. And what other things do you notice in terms of setting the environment or keeping clipped in with your, as it relates to your kids at least? Because I think hear things like keeping away from harm, and it's easy to think physical harm and like being the macho protector of the house. And sure, if someone comes to, physically harm our family, we're there for them. But I think it's all the other harm, the underlying, the mental things and the emotional things and these different things that as guys, we're not necessarily on the lookout for. As a guy, it's like, oh yeah, I'd take a bullet for my family, but how are we doing how are we doing those smaller sacrifices day in, day out to keep the emotional protection, to keep the mental protection? Are there any strategies you have that come to mind in that sense from not just the physical side of things?
Words. Your words will tear apart a kid faster than anything. You know what I mean? I once heard it told that there's two things you can't take back: bullets and words. And our words will just totally destroy our children, from their self-esteem, their self-worth. I mean, you will literally shred them, and the emotional damage that you will cause them with your words lasts a lifetime. One of the things that I dealt with my daughter, Nakota, is I was very, very harsh with her. For whatever reason, your first child, you don't know at all, and anybody who says they know is lying to you. Okay. They don't know. With her, I was very harsh. I didn't know how to be a father, so I reverted back to, as fathers, what we do is when we don't know, we revert back to what we were taught. Okay. And I'm not bagging on my old man. My old man was reverting back to what he was taught. He was a harsh man, excuse me. Love my father. Love him to death. I wouldn't be the man I am today if it wasn't for him. But he taught me what he was taught. And it's a cycle that we need to break. And with that, I saw that in my daughter. I was very, very harsh with her. I never hit her. You know what I mean? She got a spanking here and then, but I think it would have been better if I would have spanked her than some of the words I spoken over her or into her life. You know what I mean? Those are some of the things that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. I can't say on my own, accord that it's been me at all. I mean, it's been God and through different resources that I've used. One of the great resources I used was a book called by Meg Meeker. And she wrote this book called Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. And I really delved into that. I started reading intensely because I wanted that relationship to be bigger and stronger. My daughter's the testament why I don't drink. I haven't drank in over 14 years or 13 years, sorry. One of the things that my wife came up to me and told me was, I can't tell you to stop drinking, she'd tell me. Because I used to drink to relax, okay? Like any lineman, you drink, you relax, calm down from the day. But my wife came up to me specifically one day and she told me, I can't tell you to stop drinking. I'm not going to do that. You're going to do what you're going to do at the end of the day. Because I was one of those guys who said, Jesus turned water into wine. That was the first miracle, right? I justified it. And I'm not saying drinking's bad for everybody. I'm just saying for me. And, I kept denying it. But finally, my wife got a hold of me. She's like, look, I can't tell you what to do. She's like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be a nagging wife. But I will tell you this. Your daughter is you as a representative, as a father to your daughter, you are the first influence in her life of a man and what she's going to look for. And then I remember she specifically told me, are you okay with her being familiar with that smell? She's like, are you okay with her being comfortable with you smelling like a distillery? Because I used to drink heavy. And that just, I mean, it was like a straight knife right to the heart. And I thought about it. And from that day on, I've never drank it. And I was just like, absolutely not. I want to be a good father. I want to be there. Another thing that I used to chew. I had a cycle. Okay. And one of the cycles was if I wasn't drinking, I was chewing. And if I wasn't chewing, I was drinking. And that's how I quit each one. And it was just a big cycle. Okay. So once I stopped drinking, I started chewing heavily. And my wife would tell me, she's like, man, I wish you just drink. She's like, you're worse when you quit from chewing. You know what I mean? Because I'd have like a conniption fit. And one day I was asking the Lord, I was like, God, I need to stop this darn chewing. It was even making me sick. I didn't even like doing it. It would make me sick, but I'd still do it. I'd have like 1 or 2 cans a day. And I'd been chewing since I was 14. So, go figure. So finally, one day I was sitting outside and I was, in my farm in the backyard. And I was just sitting by myself, spending some alone time and contemplating on what my wife had told me about the chewing and stuff. And I was like, well, God, you can stop me from drinking. You know what I mean? Why don't you remove tobacco from me? And it was just real quiet, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't hear anything. So I started working again. And a lot of times for men, what we need to do to hear from the Lord is to be busy. Okay. And for me, when I'm busy, whether it be pulling weeds or chopping wood or whatever, those are kind of mindless tasks. Even if you're going on a long drive or whatever, it's kind of a mindless task. I mean, you're in, but you're kind of zoning out, right? On long drives or whatever. And that's when he could really speak to you. And he spoke to me and he kind of showed me everything. He showed me my daughter getting married and stuff like that and walking down the aisle, and I wasn't present. And then he showed me another like thought of me being present. So he basically was telling me in that spot, I believe is that I have a choice. I could choose life or choose death. Which one do you want? And that right there, I stopped once again, cold turkey. And I've never had another chew ever again, but it was once again because I chose my family over my vices. I
want to choice. Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to commend you for that, because a lot of people can hear that message and, thank God for your wife speaking powerful words into you, and for the other, being able to see that the 2 things of you being present or not being present, but being able to actually follow through and act on those things takes some courage too, because it does, there are people that I'm sure have gotten confronted with similar words or similar situations that, again, we keep talking about justification and can probably justify around it of being like, well, it's not that big of a thing, or kind of writing off that thing. So I do think it's awesome that you're able to, follow through on that and actually choose your family. Some people, I think it's one thing to say, again, when we talk actions versus words, to say like, yeah, I'll choose my family, but I'm not going to get rid of this or this, or I'm not going to work on this. And being able to follow through on that, I think is a powerful thing.
Absolutely. And, you said something earlier about everybody says that they'll die for their family. Well, what about living for yours? You know what I mean? I used to say the same thing. I'll die for my family, but I've chosen now to live for them, and I want to live my best life. I do. I want to live my best life. I want them to have their best life. And in order to go forward and see that best life means being healthy, being happy. You know what I mean? Happiness is a state of mind. I get it. You know what I mean? But if you can do things to produce that, why not? You know what I mean? Have a better life. Get rid of those energy leaks that are stealing from you, because that's all we have is time, really. And one of the things that really strikes me now is I just lost my baby brother. Okay. He passed away. He was 38 years old. He died one day before his 39th birthday. Okay. He was hunting and we don't know yet. We think it might've been a heart attack or something. He killed a big monster bull elk, and he was with his wife, one of the last conversations I had with him was, I was talking about, what he wanted to do. And I was trying to get him to go into another business venture or something like that to help people. And one of his things that he said was, all I have is 20 years. He's like, that's it. He's like, I have 20 more years. All my daughters will be out of the house and I can go and do whatever I want after that. Well, guess what, dude? He don't have 20 more years. Life is too short. You know what I mean? Life is too short. It's not promised to no man. You know, and man, that just it still hits me. It still hits me today. I mean, and this is just, you know, he just passed away October 26th. You know what I mean? Just a week ago, and I still remember that last conversation I had with him. I just got 20 more years, he told me. Man, life is too short, and it's not. I mean, he has 3 daughters now. He's one of these fathers that's not going to be there for them. He's not going to be able to see them walk down that aisle, you know? And it just blows me away. You know what I mean? There's fathers that are taken away real young like that. And then you get these guys who don't even want to spend time with their kids. And it just blows me away, you know, blows me away. Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear you. I know we talked a little bit about that before the show, and man, I can't imagine. And it just shows how precious life is, though. And I think that's why your mission's so strong, though, of trying to, you know, get rid of this lack of fatherhood in the household, this lack of the head of the household. And whether that's, you know, physical absence, obviously we can't control, you know, to some degree the health things or things like that, but you know, whether that's a physical absence in the household or like we were talking about, or is that just an absence in terms of not being there emotionally, not being there, not being there to pour into your kids and be present for your kids. And why is this, you know, we touched on a couple of things already, I think, but why is this such a big problem that we continue to see? We talked about the danger of words so far. We talked about other vices like drinking, like other addictions. We talked about work. What's your take on why this is such a big issue, this lack of fatherhood in the household? Because like I was talking to you about, I was fortunate enough that I had a great dad in my life, but so many people I talk to don't have that same thing. And it's, I think it's a real problem that we can kind of turn a blind eye to, but you want to kind of shed some light on maybe some main reasons on why this is occurring and what we can do to start to reverse it?
Yeah, through all my studies and everything that I've been doing and just in this pursuit of all this, one of the main things I've come up with is that I think fathers we need to realize how vital our role is as being a leader in our home. Okay. And a lot of these things that are contribute to this is because as fathers, I think we have lost our purpose in that role. We didn't have an example of what a good father should be, you know? So I think that's one of the major contributors, you know what I mean, to where you become you become passive, you know what I mean? An absentee father, you know, is because we've actually lost our purpose in that role, you know what I mean? Our sense of purpose, I should say. You know, when we fail to recognize as fathers how pivotal our influence is, okay, the media, culture, all these things will start filling in and will subtly start to emasculate our children. You know what I mean? And I think that's where we're at today in society. I mean, we're causing our sons to stay sons or boys longer instead of them going out in the world, you know what I mean? And all these rites of passage, all these other societies have these rites of passages, correct? Like a bar mitzvah, that's a rite of passage into manhood, correct? There's the a walkabout that the Aborigines have. And then there's one even here. There's in Isleta Pueblo, they're a native tribe or a native Indian tribe, American tribe. And they have a rite of passage they call the evergreen, where the boy will go out into the mountains and it's kind of like a walkabout. And I mean, in the snow and everything, and they'll travel up this big old peak and they'll do whatever little ceremony or whatever. But when they come back, they're supposed to have this rite of passage when they come back that they have become transitioned from a boy to a man. And I think right now we don't have that in society. And I think it's because fathers have lost that inclination. You know what I mean? They don't know because they didn't have that as a role model in their lives. And it's a vicious cycle that's getting passed and passed and passed forward. You know what I mean? There's a reason why kids are living in their basement into their 30s, playing video games. You know what I mean? And they don't go out. You know, they don't even know what it is to be a father or you know, or a husband or any kind of leadership influence at all. You know what I mean? And I attribute it to them having poor role models in the home. You know.
And what could some of these rites of passage look like in terms of, are you encouraging to get kids out working more experiences, or a formal thing? What would that look like in our society?
I think, you know, first off, we live in a generation where we give a trophy out, right? We've totally taken away the hard work ethic. Okay. You know, back in the day, if you did good, you studied hard, you know, you got into law school or whatever, you know what I mean? There's always a benefit to working hard. Okay. With that being said, the generation that we have now, we give a trophy out for everything. You could take 7th place, you know, this is a perfect example right now. A good friend of mine, you know, he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner, black belt. He was telling me today that he went to this soft tournament with these kids. Okay. And one of the boys took first. Okay. Well, the kid that took 7th place came up to him literally, and he has it on camera and tells him, so what? I got the same trophy as you, and I didn't even have to work hard. That's the society we live in. And it's sickening, you know, and I think that's one of the major contributions to what's going on. You know, I believe personally, growing up, and I'm trying to instill this with my children. I had a few videos on Instagram where I'd go and I'd get wood. You know, we burn wood. You know, we live in the country, and that's like one of the traditions that we have is we go and we chop wood, and everybody helps and stuff like that. And I caught some flack. You know, I had some people on there say, "Oh my God, I can't believe you have your kids, you know, dragging logs and stuff." You know what I mean? I'm like, you know what I mean? Get real. You know what I mean? This is good for us. This is, you know, we're outside in nature. What more do you want? You know what I mean? We're working together as a family. We're seeing how vital it is to gather wood for the family so we can be warm. You know what I mean? During the winter, you know, it gets cold here in the Rocky Mountains. You know what I mean? And I think little things like that, even going fishing, you know, my brother, when he passed away, he wrote one of the most profound things I'd ever heard. I posted it on Facebook, and it was just a letter he had written. Okay. And I don't have it here in front of me. I wish I did. I could read it to you, but it was just such a blessing to hear how he had mended his relationship with my father. You know, him and my dad weren't really close growing up. He was the baby. And in his letter that he wrote, he was talking about how in the moonlight with his dad, just in the forest, you know, with no distractions at all, and just hearing the elk bugle and just learning life lessons from his father, you know what I mean? That he had felt that total peace. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we need to do. We need to get away and get away from all this technology and everything we have, just to slow things down, to engage with our children, to get that bond back. You know what I mean? For my brother, it was being out in the mountains with my dad. You know what I mean? Hunting, chasing after a big elk or whatever, even if it was just fishing. You know what I mean? Just spending that one-on-one quality time with his father that he didn't have in the beginning. You know what I mean? And I told my father, I was like, man, be grateful, Dad. I was like, be grateful that you got that time to spend with him the last 2 years of his life to really fix that bond with you guys. And I'll never forget that. I won't. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, like I said, I wish I had it here to read to you. I mean, it was pretty amazing what he wrote, you know what I mean? And just, I don't know. I mean, I hope that answered what you're asking me. You know,
yeah, it did. Yeah.
On a tangent there.
No, it's a good tangent, because I love the slowing down piece too, because I think as, you know, individuals, even as adults, we're working at a speed sometime that's way too quick when it's reactive to society and to technology and to those things. Would you say that slowing down is so important for our kids too, because that allows us to show them that they're more important than our media, than our business, than our jobs and our careers and all those things? I know you mentioned that earlier. Is that a, would you say that's an accurate way to kind of be able to show that love?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you're just re-solidifying what you tell them. You could tell them you love them all day long, but at the end of the day, if you're not showing it in action and showing them that they're more important, like you just, touched on, I mean, it's so important. You know what I mean? And I have friends who push their kids. I think a lot of times as parents, we try to live vicariously through their children, through our children, right? So they push their kids to be, volleyball players or the next NBA guy or baseball player or whatever. Reality, I mean, you got to really, really think about it. Your chances, your kids going to school and being a Division I player are pretty broad, dude. I mean, there's a lot of kids that are doing that. So all that time you're pushing them and pushing them and pushing them, they don't even have a chance to be children. You know what I mean? You're putting these unfair expectations on them to where they're losing their innocence, literally. You know, it's crazy that we tend to do that. You know what I mean? And it's not right. I don't believe it's right. You know what I mean? I believe it's okay to have a healthy deal where you want your kids to succeed and you're teaching them the importance of hard work and stuff like that. But when you're pushing them so fast to where they can't even enjoy themselves as a child, I don't agree with that at all. You know what I mean?
And I think there's got to be a difference. Would you
There's
say?
got to be a healthy balance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think a balance, and I think a focus on the process over the prize type of thing. A focus on the, what are you doing? Focus on the hard work itself versus a focus on the performance. 'Cause I think when it gets tied to performance, that's got to be hard on a kid if it's simply down to, did you win? Did you lose? Did you get an A or did you get a B? Like, I think those things are probably harder than, did you study for this many hours? Did you put this much work in? Are different focuses. Would you agree with some of that?
Yeah, I do. I do agree with that. I know for me, I wrestled since I was in six years old. Okay. I went all over. I went to Oklahoma, California, stuff like that. I wrestled for Sunkist and New Mexico Roadrunners and stuff like that. And by the time I got to high school, I got burnt out. I was really push. And I got to high school and I got burnt out. You know what I mean? I didn't want to do it anymore, and I think it was more focused on performance. You know what I mean? When anytime you have a performance-based household, you're doing things wrong. It was, okay, you do this and you'll get this. You know what I mean? And it wasn't healthy, and I think people tend to do that in their households. I could be wrong. You know what I mean? A lot of the parents I see, that's what they do. They base everything on performance. You know what I mean? If you do this, then you get this. You know what I mean? And that's not a good representation, especially when you think about, for me, example, I was raised in a performance-based household. Okay. So then that being said, I started to, it worked its way into my life to where I started to recognize God as that way too. So anytime I got something good in my life, right? Something happened great in my life, I was waiting for it to I literally had a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay. I was waiting to self-destruct because I was waiting for it to be taken away. And I think a lot of people fall into that category. There's a great book called Sabotage that was written by a guy named Trinity Jordan. Okay. And he talks about how when we don't deal with that, we start bringing that into every single relationship, whether it be work or whatever. And we start, self-fulfilling that prophecy to where we start destroying, literally unwinding the very fabric of our lives. You know what I mean? And it's because we haven't dealt with that issue. Okay. There's a root, you know what I mean? And that's the fruit of that root, you know what I mean? That root cause. And I think that's what happens a lot with, to tie that back into fathers, is that we have this void, like I was talking about earlier, where we want to hear attaboy. We want to know that we're doing good. And when we don't get that from our fathers, we will spend our entire lifetime, whether at work or whatever, trying to fill that void. Okay. And it could go the other way too. It could be to where we're like, I'm never going to be like that. I'm going to prove my father wrong. Okay. I'm going to prove him wrong. And then you go on to this big old, tangent again, going off, trying to prove the rest of your life that you aren't what your father said you were. And both of those two things right there are very self-destructive. You will lose your marriage, you will lose your children. It's just a recipe for disaster.
For those listening that do maybe relate to one side of that or the other, how do you go about starting to break that down, and how do you lose or let go of control of some of that? Because it's more than just acknowledging it. Those things run pretty deep.
Yeah. Once again, it falls back to just realizing our role as a father. You know what I mean? I think as a father, we have, let's see, five things. I'm going to read them to you real quick, okay? That we're supposed to provide as a father. Okay. We're supposed to be a loving provider, a strong protector, a truthful leader, a respect. We got to show our kids a respectful position of authority. Okay. And the last one is to be an intimate friend to our father, or to our children as a father. The second one I spoke about, the respectful authority, that's what we see today in society, and there's no respect for police officers. There's no respect for our teachers. I don't know how many times I've seen teachers, complain that their children want to beat them up. That would have never happened back in my day. I mean, I grew up where I got spanked by their principal. You know what I mean? And it was because there was that fear installed. There was that authority that our fathers were teaching us. You know what I mean? Right or wrong, black or white. There's no gray area there. You know what I mean? There's consequences to everything we do in life. And that's, I think, what as fathers, we're supposed to show our children. I'm not talking about beating them up or nothing like that. I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is they have to realize that there's a consequence to what they're doing. You know what I mean? If you steal, guess what? There's a consequence for that. Okay. If you are having premarital sex, guess what? There's consequences to that too. And I think it's become taboo, and no one wants to touch base on that. No one wants to talk about that anymore. And what happens is now we're relying on our educational system to teach this curriculum to our children. I heard the other day that California has one of the most horrific curriculums about sex education right now that's out. I mean, it was so bad that the guy couldn't even talk about it. And I got to do more research on that and check it out. You know what I mean? But I was just kind of profound that, you know what I mean? First off, the question is, why are you allowing the school to teach your kids about the talk? You know what I mean? What's wrong with the father? Why can't you step up and talk to your children about that? It just blows my mind that people are taking a back seat and allowing society to basically father our children, you know what I mean? And mother our children, and I hope that answered your question,
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I think there is such a, in the household, in marriages, I don't have kids, can't speak for that, but even within our marriages, there's can be such a kind of reactive, passive type mindset of letting things just happen versus being more intentional with how you're showing up as a leader, how you're showing up as a husband, how you're showing up as a dad. And what are maybe I want to hear from you, what are some ways that can be more intentional and kind of like practical things can take away of how do we go from just being like, oh, our kids are just going to grow up as our kids grow up, versus what are some like intentional strategies? Or you talk about things like purpose. What are some ways you can start to say, like, what is my purpose as a father? What is my purpose as a family? What do we want to stand for? And how do we start to implement those things?
I think just to really just have it in the back of your head that they watch you, be consistent. Okay. Walk the walk. You know what I mean? If you tell them it's important to go to bed at night and everything else and go to bed early and stuff like that, show them. Don't just tell them. Don't be a dictator. You're not called to be a dictator in your home. You know what I mean? At some point in time, yeah, you're the lead, you're the father figure and stuff like that, and they got to do, what you say, but don't be a dictator. No one wants to, listen to that. I mean, that's where rebellion starts to kick in. Another thing too, with what you said earlier about being intentional, be intentional with them. Try to engage with them. You know what I mean? Listen to them. And I mean, your kids will come up to you all day long, fighting. They're fighting for your attention. You got to show them that the television or the internet or whatever it is, you know what I mean, that you're doing isn't more important than when they are to you. You know what I mean? And that's a big thing right there. You know, don't ever, if you tell them don't lie, don't lie. You know what I mean? I told a white lie one time. My daughter told me, she's like, she turns around, she's like, "Oh, Daddy, why'd you lie?" And I'm like, oops, open mouth, insert foot. You know what I mean? They're paying attention. That's how much influence we have. So with those few things that I just spoke on, I mean, that pretty much covers a lot of it. You know what I mean? Just watch your words. You know what I mean? You could tear them down pretty drastically with your words. You know what I mean? Always try to encourage them. You know what I mean? Encourage them. At the end of the day, we're trying to raise healthy young Americans, right? Healthy young adults, correct? We don't want them all torn up and having to go through years or hours of some kind of psychosis or whatever because what we did to them, you know what I mean? Because we mentally just messed them all up, you know what I mean? We want to raise healthy children because in turn, what's that going to produce? That's going to produce a healthy society. And that's what we want. We want them to live a life of intentionality. We want them to strive after and work hard, you know what I mean? And do the things they love to do. And basically teach them as children how to problem solve. Just a quick correlation that I had is I'd get these apprentices once in a while. And they'd come to me and they would just do things. They just automatically do things. They had no reason why they did things. They just did them. And I'd have to stop them. And I tell them, I don't want a robot. I want you to be out here. I want you to be able to use your head. Because it's not when you get in a bind, it's how you get out of a bind, I used to tell them. And I think that's with our kids too. Binds are going to come. You know what I mean? You're going to get yourself in a pickle. Your job is to teach those kids how to get out of that pickle. You know what I mean? To think their way out of it, to help them to succeed in life. And if it, and back to consequences, you know what I mean? You do this, there's a consequence for that. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we need to do as fathers is just teach them how to problem solve. These are skills that are not being taught anymore, really. You know what I mean? They just kind of just go through life kind of, I don't know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I love that. I love tying in, what you said earlier with what you're just talking about with problem solving, with there being consequences, and tying that in with the fact that they're observant, they're seeing how you actually act to it. So there's ways to try and teach that, but also what happens when you get in a bind and how you're responding to that, how you're showing to that. If you're, when everything's good, and it's one thing to be a certain person, a certain leader in that situation, but when things don't go as planned, if you start freaking out or respond with anger or respond with shutting down or getting reserved, they're going to pick up on those things too. And same thing with showing there's consequences. We're not pretending to be perfect, but being vulnerable and saying like, hey, I made this, or we made this decision. Like, this is what happened. This is the result of my actions. And I think just being more open about that sounds like two ways to have your actions match your words and have them actually see how you respond to those things versus just saying, again, like the dictatorship, not saying like, when you get in a pickle, do this. It's like they're going to see how you actually handle that as a person.
Absolutely. And once again, it falls back to being that example, and you hit the nail right on the head again when, you said, how are you going to respond during that crisis? I mean, right now we're in a major crisis. How are you going to handle it? They're watching you. You know what I mean? Are you going to lose your temper in line because someone doesn't have their mask on? You know what I mean? We're supposed to be walking around. If you want your children to respect authority, you know what I mean? Don't be cussing out the cop who just passes by or whatever, you know what I mean? And then wondering where they get it from. You know what I mean? I don't know how many times I've seen, friends, their kids, you know what I mean? They're cussing. And the parents, you look at them and whatever, you know what I mean? If your kid wants to cuss, that's on him, whatever, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, don't look at me and say, I wonder where he learned that from. You know what I mean? It's like, those are your kids, bro. They're learning it from you. You know what I mean? Or they're learning it from somebody. It's under your watch. You know what I mean? Our children, as fathers, our children are our watch. When we die and we go to heaven or wherever it is, you believe you're going to go or whatever, you know what I mean? I believe we're going to have to answer for what we did with our children and how we raised them. We're responsible for our family. Otherwise, they would have never been given to us. We have them for 13 summers, really. 13 summers, if you think about it. That goes by quick. If you're lucky enough to have a good relationship with them, you'll continue to have that influence in their lives. But in reality, 13 summers is all we have until the age of 13. And then they start making decisions themselves and getting self-sufficient and don't even want anything to do with you. You know what I mean? We have 13 years or 13 summers to create that influence in their life.
That's crazy to think about. Again, puts the perspective of time in there and how precious time is. And I love, though, your point on having to, answer or from a significant standpoint of what impact do we have on our family? How do we lead our family? What do we leave them with? And that can't be, well, I simply just made money for them, or I simply provided, or I simply, I had these accolades. That's not the type of significance we should be after. That's not going to leave a lasting legacy for our kids. It's got to be more than just providing financially. And I think that's where some people probably get into some trouble.
Yeah, I think we stop right there, and we think we're providing. Like for me, I thought, I'm providing a roof over my children's heads. They don't got to beg, borrow or steal. They had a great life. But then we stop there. We think, okay, that's all we need to do. I'm going to go support the family. I'm going to go do this and do that. And at the end of the day, dude, there's so much more that we have to do. You know what I mean? We're called to do more for them. Kind of like what I just spoke about on, those things, being a protector, a leader, an authority figure, a friend to them. You know what I mean? More than just being a provider. And we stop there, I think, as fathers. We really do. We stop there thinking, I'm just going to provide for them. I know a lot of friends that they come home and they're just too tired. They're tired. They had a rough day at work or whatever. And I'm guilty of this too. I used to come home and you know what I mean? My kids would be bugging me and stuff like that. And I'd kind of snap at them. You know what I mean? And it's like, man. And some of the ways for fathers out there who don't know how to deal with that, my suggestion is take an extra 10, 15 minutes outside, cool down, get some perspective. You know what I mean? Take the long route home or whatever, you know what I mean? And then another thing too is don't bring your work home. Don't bring your work home. You walk in that door, you take off your jacket, your problems and everything from the outside world stay there and you hang them up right there. And I think that'll help out a lot of fathers out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think it's so easy to let those things creep in. And again, I keep coming back to intentionality with that. You have to, it doesn't take a lot of effort and it doesn't take a lot of time necessarily, but it does take that little bit of extra effort, that little bit to take, like you said, 5 extra minutes, take some deep breaths in the car before you go in, like let those things leave there. Other things like journaling, meditation, prayer, reading, just time to, like you said, taking the long road home, finding something that can, get that little bit of release or letting go of those things that are stressing you so that you can show up better for the relationships around you.
Absolutely. And I mean, a guy I know, he's he's a father too. He's real intentional in what he does. He practices the Wim Hof method of breathing. You know what I mean? And it's stellar. You know what I mean? And that's what he does. You know what I mean? To really just calm himself and stuff like that, and get better perspective and stuff like that. And that's kind of one of the things I like to do as well. You know what I mean? The Wim Hof method of breathing. And or just even just reading. You know what I mean? Reading. I've gotten into running again. I used to run pretty competitively with my wife. And I used to do adventure races before adventure races actually were as big as they are now, like Spartan race and all that stuff. And I used to do actual adventure races back in the day. And I used to love running a lot, and trail racing and stuff like that. And I started getting back into that, and it's pretty awesome because each one of our kids used to run with us. I'd run 5-6 miles a day in the you know what I mean, in the foothills of the Rockies over there, and I'd be taking each one of those kids. You know what I mean? And we finally retired the stroller on this last baby, which is pretty cool, man. That thing has over 1,000 miles on that thing. You know what I mean? And that was really one of the things that I really missed when I was on the road, is being able to take the whole family running. You know what I mean? And just little things like that, just sharing. Just like right now, we just go for walks. You know what I mean? Go for walks, and we talk, and we turn off our devices, and we spend that quality time together as a family. One of the things that my daughter and I like to do is to play Speed. I don't know if you're familiar with the card game Speed.
A little bit.
Yeah, we play that, and she beat me 6 times last night in a row. And I was giving her a hard time and stuff like that. But that's one of the little things that she enjoys to do that she missed with me when she was younger. You know what I mean? And just being real intentional, like you talked about, with them, and just spending that time, making that extra effort, even if it's 10 minutes to put together a Lego. I mean, that's huge in your child's life. I mean, my wife told me one time, she's like, man, you just spent 10 minutes with your kid, and that just made his whole day, just to put together those Legos. He had some Legos he wanted me to make into a dinosaur, and it was 10 minutes. I mean, my God, 10 minutes, that's nothing. And the whole day he was a good kid. He wasn't fighting with his other brother or nothing. You know what I mean? It's just being that intentional father, you know what I mean? Engaging, you know what I mean? And I think it's so important.
Definitely. I don't think we realize it's not a one for one. I put this much time in and this much return comes out. It can be really exponential with, like you said, 10 minutes can totally change, can change their day. 10 minutes can do that. But on the other side of things, the negative side of that is that one wrong phrase out of our mouth, one sentence, seconds can, negatively impact them for years too, which just is what it is. There's no way around it, but being aware of that and being aware that our actions and our words carry a lot of weight behind them. And I think that's important for, whether you have kids, whether it's just a relationship, whether it's family or friends, like our words carry weight, our actions carry weight that go beyond just the direct one-to-one impact and return on that.
Absolutely. When you're just talking about that, brother, I just had this thought. I heard this piece one time where it said, trust is built with drops and lost in buckets. You know, and I just it just resonates in my mind. You know what I mean? And that's the truth right there. Every little step is a win. You know what I mean? Um, when I'd go on hurricanes and stuff like that, we'd show up, and it looked like an atomic bomb went off. I mean, you had power lines down. It looked like a spider web. And one of these foremen that I look up to, he would tell me, he's like, "Oh, how do you eat an elephant?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "One bite at a time." He's like, "You don't focus on the disaster and the mess down there. We go one pull at a time." And that's what we do. And little by little, chipping away at that. You know what I mean? Next thing you know, we're putting off thousands and we're picking up whole grids. You know what I mean? And it was just that little work, because you can get overwhelmed. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of fathers get overwhelmed in general, thinking, "Oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to pay the bills. I got to do this." And we get overwhelmed. Live in that moment. If you're in that moment and you're going to be engaged with your kid, be engaged with your kid. You know what I mean? And just one bite at a time, one little sliver at a time, be intentional. and you'll see progression. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. You will see progression. You know.
Love it. That's such a good metaphor for life too. And I think that's, that's just a great approach in general to not get overwhelmed, not focus on the things that don't matter the most either. It's easy to get caught up in the wrong things, but I think that's huge. And David, all this has been great. A couple of things I want to share, some of the bullet points I've jotted down, and then I'll let you add in anything that you want to. But a few of the top things I took away was aiming for significance over success. I think that's one of the biggest things that, honestly, probably the biggest takeaway of, it's so tempting to chase success. It's so society wants us to just chase success and our own fame and for our own pride, for our own gathering money, gathering things at the expense of having true significance and, creating a household that really matters and not going beyond our life for generations to come. The second thing, making sure our actions match our words. I love that you kept coming back to consistency and making sure that we are not just saying one thing and then turning around and doing the opposite thing. Is they're going to follow the things that we do. So making sure that our actions match our words. And then I absolutely love the quote you had too of so many people are willing to die for their family. And it's a very macho thing to do, but time to start living for your family instead. And that was really powerful for me. So those were a few of the big takeaways I had. Is there anything you want to add here as we start to wrap up?
No, just you hit all the points right there that I wanted to talk about. Just being consistent, being that leader, having that influence, you got to spend time. You want that influence in your children, you got to put that time in. You know what I mean? Just like anything, you want a better body. Well, guess what? Put in that hard work, put in that time. You know what I mean? One of the things that you were saying, and it just kind of came to me, is that you can't serve two masters. Okay. We all buy into the illusion that we can multitask. Okay. That's a lie. That's a lie. There's no such thing as multitasking. If you want to be great at something, focus on that. Be intentional with that. Because when you're buying into this lie that you can multitask, you can chase after success and chase after this. Guess what? Something's suffering. You can't have two masters. Okay. You can't serve both money and your family. You can't serve, you know what I mean? You cannot do that. So pick your battle. You know what I mean? That's what I say, from this. Pick your battle. Pick what you want. At the end of the day, we have a choice. You know what I mean? Be that guy. Stand up and be that man. Because someone else isn't going to do it for you. You know what I mean? And I mean, prime example, I go back to my brother, God rest him. You know what I mean? I love him. Now we're having to be the father figure for his three daughters who he left, and it's crazy. You know what I mean? It's just really crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And what you're saying to that too, fighting the right battles, I think it requires some reflection around making sure that because we can't multi-focus, because we can't multitask, we have to have some reflection there to make sure we're heading the right direction. If we're just, head down, grinding, hustling, whatever you want to call it, if you're just putting your head down and going and never stepping back to reflect to make sure we're actually on the right path, you might cover a lot of distance over time, but you better make sure you're going in the right direction that you want to be. And I think that reflection component's another big thing to make sure that you're going the way that you want to be going.
Absolutely. And then another thing too I want to touch base on is you will make the time for what's important. I mean, that's true in anything. A lot of people say, "Oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the time." That's bull. You will make the time if it's important to you. If it's really important to you, you will make that time. So figure out what's important to you and then make that time.
Yeah. Great addition there. Yeah. I love that. So as we wrap up here, got a couple final questions, and then I want to hear about the other things that you have in the works here. But one of the questions I tend to ask people too, and I kind of want to put a little different spin on this because I appreciate your vulnerability already with mentioning the struggles early on, and even as of 2 years ago, the struggles you've had as a father and being able to connect with your kids. And you've made this awesome turnaround. You're out there encouraging other dads to do the same. You're fighting this fight that is absolutely awesome. And I think people can see you as a leader in the field and think that, well, now you have it all figured out. Now you have this whole fathering thing down. And I think I'm sure you'd be the first to admit that that's not true. What's something as of the past couple of years, so since your recent turnaround, something maybe even more recently, that what is something you're still having a challenge with? If you don't mind being vulnerable again with something when it comes to raising your kids, like what are the challenges you're still facing and the things that are actually in the end creating more closeness with your kids and creating more growth for you as a man?
I think for me, it's watching my words. I have to be so intentional with my words. Like I said, I explained earlier in the podcast that my father, you know what I mean, was pretty harsh. So that's in me. Um, Obviously, I'm working on that for it to come out. You know, I'm not perfect by any means, and I do have words that slip. You know what I mean? And I got to be extra intentional with that for me, and that's one of the struggles I have. You know what I mean? I've already, I've already checked the box on alcohol and tobacco and all these vices that were robbing me from my family, right? But everybody has a struggle, and my struggle is to actually watch my words with my children, that harshness, because it even goes as far as you may not say something mean, but just the way you say it and the way they perceive it, you know what I mean? And I am starting to realize that I have the ability to change the atmosphere. Okay, we all do. Okay, it's cold outside, you open up the door, right? Cold air comes in, you just change that atmosphere. Well, what do? You shut that door, right? And it's the same thing with creating the atmosphere in our family. You know what I mean? You don't open up those doors. You know what I mean? If you do, you have the ability to shut that door, you know what I mean? Obviously. But we just got to watch that atmosphere, watch that tone, watch that tempo. I'm not saying, you know, not, tough love or whatever like that. I'm not saying that by any means. I'm so far from that. But the level of harshness that I used to speak to my children was just crazy. And that's something that I deal with. And it goes along with even just being a tradesman, being a lineman, you know what I mean? Yelling, you know what I mean? I naturally talk loud because I can't really hear from being around heavy equipment, you know what I mean? Helicopters and stuff like that. So when I'm starting to talk loud, my wife will give me that look like, okay, you need to turn it down. You're getting too excited. You know what I mean? Because I have a tendency to get real excited real quick, So I'm just watching that always. It's always got to be something that I'm aware of, you know what I mean? And just try to be intentional with that, falls back to being intentional with that.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. I love your point too on we can mean well, but it's more than our intention too when it comes to communication. It's how's it actually getting received. We can have all the best intentions, but if our tone or our words don't match that and it's getting received differently, that's at the end of the day, that's really what, how it's actually being communicated. And that's a big thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually learned that from a pastor who was, me and my wife both lead a marriage on the rocks deal at our church. And I had learned that about the first 60 seconds of our conversation will never rise above the level of how we're speaking. You know what I mean? So if you're talking like down at your spouse, she's not going to be able to receive anything at all, And I see that with my children and stuff like that. So I just keep that in mind, you know what I mean? Just always be constant, always be aware, you know what I mean? With our children and how we're speaking to them. And, you know what I mean? I find I get better results, you know what I mean? Than just yelling at them all day and telling them you're this or you're that or whatever, like I used to, you know what I mean? So I'm seeing positive results. Everything is a work in progress. You know what I mean? I learn a new tool. It's just like being in the line trade. You get a new tool, you learn how to use it, you utilize it, and you see if you like it or not. And it's the same thing in life. You gain a new tool, you utilize it, you see if it works or not, and you either adapt with it or you tweak it a little bit and you make it work for you. And if it doesn't work, then you discard it. And it's the same thing, you know what I mean? So
Love that. Yeah, really well said, David. And last hypothetical question here that I ask all the guests as we wrap up is, so our hypothetical scenario, say you're leaving your favorite coffee shop in town, your favorite restaurant in town, and you run into younger David 10 years back. So 10 years prior, you're on your way to an important date with your family. Can't miss it. You only got 60 seconds to talk with him. He wants to know some life advice. Asking for some words of wisdom. What are you saying to him, and what advice are you giving to him?
life is too short. Life is absolutely too short, and time is not guaranteed to anybody. You know, tomorrow is not guaranteed to nobody. You know, that's the biggest thing I would tell myself. You know, is life is just too short. So pick who you're going to spend it with. You know what I mean? Pick what's important. And I think that's what the biggest takeaway I've learned throughout this whole entire journey that I'm on is that we life is life is more important. You know, time is more important to me than anything, than money or anything like that, because that's something that we don't get back, and it's so something that we give freely. You know what I mean? We're bleeding time. You know what I mean? We constantly give time to do this and do that and do this, and you know, we waste time. A lot of our time's wasted. You know what I mean? Even if it's just, you know, thinking you're going to sit on Facebook for 30 minutes. Well, guess what? That's 30 minutes you could have been doing something, you know, positive, spending time with your children, spending time with your wife, whatever it is, you know what I mean? That's important to you, you know? And I think that's one thing I would tell myself.
Yeah, it's precious, and I think that's a great note to leave it on, and that's something that I think we all need to hear and remind ourselves of more regularly. So, David, where can we find you though? I know you got an upcoming summit too. I want to make sure to get a plug for that, because that sounds like it's awesome. Where can people reach out to you, and what are the details on that summit coming up?
Yeah, the summit that I have coming up is on November 14th. It's on www.fatherfactorsummit.com. We're going to have 6 guest speakers. It's going to be a 1-day summit, and we're going to be just talking on different aspects of the father. When you get on the link, when you get on that website, go to the bottom and sign up. Put your email address and stuff like that, and just create a deal. That way we could have your email so we can let you know the day before and give you your link so you can get on it virtual and see it on Zoom. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things I see now is like we got a lot of people getting on there, but they're not leaving their information. You know what I mean? So just go down there and just put your email and your name, and that's it. You know what I mean? It's totally free. You know, if you want to follow me, it's on Instagram, and it's first_Timothy_1_13. And that's a scripture from the Bible that I live by. It's a scripture that God gave to me a long time ago, you know, and it touches base on how I was formerly a blasphemer, a persecutor, and a violent man, but I obtained mercy because I did it ignorantly in unbelief. And to me, that's a big testament to my life today, to where I'm at. So, you know, I'm not one of these guys who never lived life or never did this or nothing like that. I serve my country. You know what I mean? I'm a tradesman. You know, I don't think you can get any more manly. You know what I mean? But I did find the Lord Jesus Christ, and because I was lost, you know, not that he was lost, I was lost, and you know, he's done miraculous things in my life. You know what I mean? And I'm a living testament, because if anybody knew me prior to this, they would be like, dude, that dude's a loke. You know what I mean? So, you know, that's kind of where I'm at today, and thank God, and you know, thank you for having me on here, and I hope you had a great time, and I hope you really you know, this something, you know, meant to you. You know what I mean? I don't know if you have any plans for having children in the future or not like that, but like, you know, if you ever have any questions or anything like that, you know, hit me up, dude. I mean, I'll do my best to try to answer anything I can. And if I can't answer it, I will find somebody, I promise you, that can answer it. You know what I mean?
Really appreciate that, David. It means a lot. It means a lot. You taking time to get on here. I love your mission, man. I'm so excited. It's cool to see what God's doing in your life. And, man, just for sharing that with us, and for the fathers out there or soon to be fathers checking out this father summit. Definitely highly recommend that. And just like I said, I absolutely love what you're doing. I'm glad we got connected, and I'm excited to see where this continues to take. It's a message that needs to get out there. So really appreciate you and appreciate you getting on here today.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. God bless.